here again with another Ask an Archaeologist. And today we are featuring Marlon Magdalena, who is our Instructional Coordinator at Jemez Historic Site. Welcome, Marlon. It's great to see you digitally.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So we're gonna do an interview style today rather than a lecture as selected by Marlon. So we'll go right into it. We'll be focusing today on Marlon's experience with archaeology and anthropology and his kind of career trajectory leading up to being instructional coordinator at Jemez Historic Site. So the very first question, how did you get your start in anthropology and archaeology?
I'll have to say, going back to 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher was a very knowledgeable person from here in Jemez Pueblo, and so he taught us a lot about Jemez history, and so that got me more interested in who I was, who my people were, and then later on in middle school, on 8th grade. I was able to participate in a program called the Pecos Pathways, and it was a partnership between the Pueblo of Jemez, Pecos National Historical Park, and Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. So it was a week program. It was the first year that they had it, and it was with students from Andover, Jemez, and then they would come here for a couple of days, talk about the history. We went out to Pecos and we looked at a few things there. We didn't really excavate anything there, but we did look at a few features along the Santa Fe trail there. We were looking for, I think we were looking for kilns and just burn areas, burn marks, looking for evidence of kilns at the time. And that was the first year so that I actually did anything to do with anthropology or archaeology. We also toured some of the places, some of the archaeological sites. I don't know if we went to the historic site at the time. It's just a week, so we didn't have a whole lot of time to do very much of anything. So I think that's my earliest introduction to anthropology and archaeology, and I was able to do more because of that. But after 1998 was the first time I did the Pecos Pathways. The following year, 99, is when over 2,000 human remains were returned to Pecos National Historical Park. That's one of the largest repatriations that has taken place so far. And so the following year, we did a hike. We walked from Jemez Pueblo to Pecos National Historical Park to meet the human remains before they're reburied at Pecos National Historical Park. So that happened a year after that first year of the Pecos Pathways program, and I participated in that a few more years. I think 3 years total. That same year, 99, and then I kind of took a break off of that, and I did other things after that too. I actually started working with Matthew Liebman, which was an archaeologist working on Pueblo Revolt era archaeological sites in the area, doing his doctoral thesis, and I was able to help him out, I think in 2000 and in 2001 and 2002. So I worked a couple summers with him, mapping different archaeological sites in the area. Specifically post-revolt sites. There's 2 of them that we were able to document, and I helped map those 2 sites. So those are, I think, my earliest ones that I can remember.
I understand that you dabbled a little bit in an anthropology degree too. I remember some of our conversations about that.
Yeah, I graduated high school in 2003, so all of this was middle school and then high school. And then I decided to try at least to get my degree in anthropology, as well as a minor in studio art.
Cool.
Yeah, but none of that really, I didn't finish. Other things happened during this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but while I was in, 2003, when I graduated high school, I participated in my last time in the Pecos Pathways, and at this time that program went on a little longer, so it went on for 3 weeks. We spent a whole week here in the Pueblo, helping Matthew Liebman work on his dissertation project. I think we collected potsherds, we surveyed a few sites up on, I don't know if any of you've been up on top of Guadalupe Mesa above the Jemez River. There's a post-revolt site up there. We hiked up there, we did some survey on the whole mesa, as well as the one below that at one of the other villages. We did some survey there. So that was about a week here, and then another week at Pecos National Historical Park. I think we did more surveys there as well. I'm not too, I don't really remember what we did there, but I think there was a lot of survey, and we actually got to go out to Boston on the third week and toured some sites out there, and spent some time with some host families. I stayed in one of the historic buildings. It's a really old house. It's kind of different experience. So it's a wooden house, so as I guess all those houses are back then.
Yeah.
So that was 2003. Then I started attending UNM in the fall. Took some courses there. In 2004, I attended the Silver Creek Archaeological Research Project with Barbara Mills in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
With the University of Arizona. It's only for 6 weeks, but I actually did excavation there at some of the sites out on the Mogollon Rim, just east of Sholo. So I camped out there, excavated, surveyed, just the usual archaeological summer schools type stuff, documentation research project. One of the things that happened with my project, I was working with ceramics, continuing someone else's research from the summer before. That person was trying to figure out the firing temperatures for different types of ceramics in the area. They didn't finish, so I was trying to finish what they were trying to do, and just putting different ceramics and putting them in a kiln and firing them up to a certain temperature and raising the temperature each time until the shirt changes color, so that we know that's about the temperature that it was. But while my stuff was in the kiln, somebody moved it and turned it off, so I wasn't able to completely finish that project. But I learned a lot about and saw a lot of different types of ceramics, especially in that area, the Mogollon Rim. So that was my first experience with field school, archaeological field school. 2004, 5. Well, in 2000, and let's see, that was the summer. 2004, and then later that fall, my daughter was born. She's going to be turning 16 in a couple weeks. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's kind of unexpected. So that did cause a lot of problems. I mean, I don't regret having her, but it did stop a lot of things from continuing. So that's one of the reasons why I couldn't get a degree, and I didn't finish my degree. So the following year, in 2005, in the summer at least, I started working with the Youth Conservation Corps, the YCC, which is common here in New Mexico. They were working out at the Jemez Historic Site when Rick Raycraft was manager. Started working there for about 3 months. Then I planned on continuing UNM, but at this time my grades just were too low and I couldn't really get back in. So I had to figure out how I was going to do this. So luckily I knew Matt Liebman, and he was working out of the University of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And they had this program called the Research Experience for Undergraduates. And so I decided to do that. And so I was accepted into that. Even though my grades were low, I was able to get into it. So the spring semester of 2006, I spent at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. For about 5 months, I was there doing research. So my research was on Pueblo shields, which sure most of you have seen my Pueblo Shield activity. But I first did that in 2006 at University of Pennsylvania, because they actually had 2 Pueblo Shields in their collections. And interestingly enough, one of those shields is actually a Jemez shield, which I didn't really expect. There's a Jemez shield there, and it's still there. And so I researched those shields, and even the ones that they keep at Mayak down in the basement. They have some Pueblo shields there too. And that was a really interesting experience, living in a big city like Philadelphia. It was nice. I lived in the dorms, I think on the 22nd floor.
Oh.
And walked to the university museum pretty much every day for class or to work in one of the rooms adjacent to Matt Liebman's office and Robert Purcell's office. So I got to know them pretty well too.
Nice.
And I made my shield in that room too, next to their office. And I donated one. I made 2. I donated one to the museum, so that's there somewhere. So that was a really good experience. Living out there. I did spend time away from my family, my daughter, and her mom at the time, or my girlfriend at the time. And so that was 5 months. And so the plan was that if I do good there, and I did well, my grade point average was pretty good. So I used that transcripts to try to get back into UNM. So that didn't really work out well. They told me that I needed to take different classes to get those grades good, and then I can get back in, and it just all didn't work out. So the summer of 2006, there's another group working at the Jemez Historic Site, but from the Pueblo of Jemez. And so I started working again that summer in 2006 for about 3 months. And then I got hired on temporarily later that year for another 3 months. And then the year before, too, 2005, after the summer job with the YCC, I was hired on for 3 months at the end of the year. But this time in 2006, I stayed on for about 3 months. And then in 2007, I actually worked for a cell phone tower company for about 3 months. Yeah, from January to March, which is another interesting experience, climbing really tall cell phone towers. The one I can remember, which is funny because I've been there since after this, was a cell phone tower that they had just put up on Mesa Prieta, one above Alcalde. So one of those cell phone towers I actually helped put up. It's right on the edge of the mesa too, but I didn't even know that there's a place that had that many petroglyphs. I remember going up along the road, driving up and seeing all these petroglyphs, but I didn't know that there's more than what there was or what there is. So, and then 2000 and later that year, I got hired on in March after the cell phone tower job. And then I was hired temporarily at Jemez Historic Site. So I've been there since.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, but just as a ranger at the beginning. And then finally in 2015, I was hired on as an instructional coordinator just from being there so long, I guess. And I did study a lot, of course, of Pueblo history. My ex-wife is from Zuni, Pueblo. So I've learned a lot about Zuni. I have aunties that live in other Pueblos. One of my aunties lives in Mesita, which is one of the Laguna Pueblos. Another auntie lives in Kuaua Pueblo. So just from visiting them and seeing them and learning from my cousins, I've learned a lot about other Pueblos, which I try to, I guess, put into everything that I do, everything that I talk about on my presentations. I try to put in all those different things that I've learned, all that information I try to put together, not just from them, but just even from here where I'm from, Jemez Pueblo, because we learn a lot here. We tell each other a lot of different things, and I hear a lot of different things, and I just try to put all of those things together, as I try to do with everything that I've learned so far, and I'm still learning. There's a lot of things that I like to share, but there are things like I can't share. But
Of course.
so yeah, I guess that's a sort of a brief introduction. There's a lot of things that happened since 2007, since I've worked at Jemez Historic Site. But,
Yeah. Life kind of happens in between our archaeology careers here.
oh yeah. Then my son was born 8 years ago. His birthday is on Sunday. So.
Oh, cool. Happy birthday to him.
Yeah.
So the next question, what is your most memorable experience working with archaeology and some of the places that you've done research?
I think my most memorable was living in Philadelphia. I mean, I didn't really do a lot of archaeology, but I guess it was mostly anthropological, learning about shields, Pueblo shields, actually being able to have at least some sort of resources because they're able to pay for certain things, like supplies like that I wanted to use to make the shields. So I was able to do that. And then they sent me home for during the spring break. So during spring break, I went to Mayak, to the collections. Tony Cheveria was the one that took me down to see the shields in those big drawers. So he was able to help out a lot. So I was able to learn a lot about those shields. I never really knew anything about them before that. And so I was lucky enough to actually see those shields and actually handle them and see how they were made. Very simple. They look very simple, but they're very time-consuming things to make. Just even looking at them, you can see how much work went into making those Pueblo shields. And while I was there too, I took a class, which was one of my favorite classes. It was the fall and rise of the Maya civilization.
Oh, yeah.
With Jerry Sabloff. And Jerry Sabloff has been one of the ones that has done a lot of research actually at the Maya sites in Mexico, Guatemala, all those places. So he's written a lot of books. So I was glad to be able to take a class with him. And of course, just living in a big city too, and I'll probably never do that again. Living in a big city where I can just walk anywhere or use public transportation, which is a whole new experience for me too at the time. But I think that would be one of my most memorable. And doing the field school too in Arizona, 2004.
So with your work in Philadelphia, correct?
Yeah.
Was that project assigned to you, or did you select it out of like a series of different topics that you could work with the museum collection there?
Okay, so that program, the research experience for undergraduates, we're able to take, I believe, 2 courses. The other one I took was it wasn't called Evolution, but it was with Janet Monge. She was pretty cool too. And then the other 2 would be independent study, basically. So all the people that were accepted into the program, and most of them were from New Mexico. There was 3 others from New Mexico, and I think a few others from other places. We just were able to choose our topic, as long as it related to anthropology, and we're able to use the resources that the museum had. Or if there's something in the museum we wanted to study on, we could do that. I wasn't sure what I was going to do until I think when I got there. And I don't remember who suggested Pueblo Shields. I think it might have been Matt Liebman, because he had a book called Pueblo Shields, which he actually gave me, and I still have. And I think he was the one that told me that there's some shields in the collection. So that's what I decided to do my project on at the time.
Very cool. I'm always interested in those programs that allow kind of like students to kind of experience museum collections. Oftentimes these objects are locked away. They're taken out of their original context and never really brought back. And I think it's important that we kind of open up these collections so that others can research them, not just archaeologists or curators, but students from other disciplines as well. I think that's kind of the movement going on right now with museum studies, is making a little bit more interdisciplinary, at least in my my new experience at University of Winnipeg. They're incorporating a lot from Indigenous studies and Latin American studies. So that's a wonderful opportunity, like light years ahead of what we're doing right now. What a wonderful opportunity we're able to be a part of. Do you have any funny stories from your most memorable archaeology experience? I feel like there's a good one with Dr. Liebman.
Well, I was, let's see, that was 2006. I was still underage at the time, so couldn't really do, I think I was 20 at that time. Well, I had some funny experiences with my field school in 2004, but I don't know if I can say those being recorded. So, but we did do a tour of a lot of the sites here in the Southwest with Barbara Mills and her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And we took a field trip to, I think we went to Zuni. We camped out at in the Chuscas after we were at the at Canyon de Chelly. So we went to Canyon de Chelly first, then we went up to the Chuscas. We camped there, and I think we went down towards Chaco after that. I don't think we went to Mesa Verde. We just went down to Chaco. We spent the night there.
How does anthropology or archaeology help you engage with your audience or contribute to your work as an instructional coordinator at Jemez Historic Site? Has it helped you at all? Has it hindered you?
Yeah, it's helped a lot. Just the experience of it. And even though I didn't get my degree, I did learn a lot from a lot of the classes that I took. And it wasn't just anthropology classes or archaeology classes. I did take some linguistics classes, which is another important thing for me, is preserving the Jemez language in any way that I can. And I continue to do so by attending conferences almost every year with the Indigenous Language Institute, which is based out of Santa Fe. They have this symposium every year and talk about, and they bring different language programs from throughout the country that involve indigenous languages, and they talk about their successes and their failures. And so I've been trying to attend those as often as I can, trying to gain as much knowledge so that way I could use it towards what I do, and then help, of course, the people here at Jemez at home. And so just just the experiences that I've had, the research that I've done, and I guess the research that I continue to do, just to try to learn more about Jemez culture, more about me, who I am.
Yeah.
And of course, all of that's also led to my flutes. I've done a lot of research on my flutes. I've learned how to play many different types of flutes. You've probably seen my videos and the songs that I've made, trying to incorporate songs that I've made up or songs that I've made up from songs that we sing here at Jemez. So I try to participate as often as I can, so that way I know songs to sing. That way I could maybe make them into a flute song. So there's all these different things that I've learned, but the most important thing that for me is to continue to participate in who I am, participate in my culture, just so that way that side doesn't disappear, or at least, and I try to tell people about who we are. That's the main thing too, is that a lot of people don't know who we are, that we still exist. And so, I'm here, I still participate, and I still speak the language that we have had for hundreds and hundreds of years, and just to tell people about it. We're still here. We're still alive.
So what are some of the new projects that you'll be working on?
Right now, after all of the videos that I've made, I hope you've all looked at them. Music with Marlon.
Yes.
What we're trying to do now is we're working on our Junior Ranger program, trying to, I guess, revamp it. I had made one. I think I started making one. It's been a while now, maybe 2012. I don't remember when I started that project. But we've had a complete one for a while now. The last time I edited it. The last time I worked on it was 2016. And so what I'm just doing now is just updating, bringing some of the activities to 2020, trying to see if we could put it online, so that way, I guess for now, for people that can't go, they can just do the Junior Ranger program online using what's available online. And then have another one which will be available to those that can actually go to the site whenever we actually open again.
Maybe very well soon.
Yeah, so with that too, with the book, the activities that are in there, I didn't want just activities that you could just do anywhere. Some of these activities, you actually have to be on site, actually look at what's there, so that way the kids or the students or whoever wants to become a Junior Ranger can actually be on site and see what's there, and they can answer the questions, or they can do the activity that's in the book. So that way they're just not doing something that they could just do at home without being at the site.
Marlon, could you tell us a little more about the shields, where the old shields came from and why they ended up in the museum? And when you took them apart or you looked at them very closely, what did you see? What were they made of, and why? How are they used? I've seen shields, but I don't know if they were used in battles or exactly why they were symbolic or what they were for.
Okay. I did do a video for our Pueblo Independence Day program just a few weeks ago, and if you go to our website, New Mexico Historic Sites .org, Jemez, and then go to Pueblo Independence Day. There's a video on the top that's got all of the videos kind of put together. But if you scroll down, you'll come to my video. It's just my video of me talking about how shields were used in the past. And then there's a link there where you can actually go to the activity and download the plans. And there's a short description of Pueblo shields there, which is actually a brief portion of my actual shields project from 2006. So that report, I don't know how many pages it is. I just had to condense it so that way it would fit into this activity, so that there's just not so much information there. But that's just a brief description. But if you all want to see the actual report that I did in 2006, I guess I could share that too eventually. Let's see, Pueblo shields. So the ones that I saw at the University of Pennsylvania Museum, the one that I said was from Jemez, I know it's from Jemez because of what decoration was on it. And there are certain symbols that only certain Pueblos use. It was a sun symbol. Now, if you look at other Pueblos, say Hopi. Because Hopi, they can share a lot of things. If you look at their sun symbol, it's very specific. It's got certain features on the face. It's got certain shaped eyes. It has eagle feathers all the way around. So when you look at that, you'll know that it's probably Hopi or maybe Zuni, because it's very specific to their pueblos. And if you look at our sun, and for us, we can't really share certain symbols, especially symbols that have faces on them, because they're spirits, and so they're not really meant to be shared. And so, but it's a very simple symbol. It's not too complicated of a symbol, but it's right in the center of that shield. So when I saw that, I knew that that was Jemez, because no one else makes their sun symbols like that. And the other shield was from a different pueblo. It didn't really have any Pueblo-specific symbols. A lot of symbols that were on that one could be from other pueblos. And so what I found out about those, at least those two shields, they're both made differently. The one from Jemez was actually two pieces. And so the reason for that is because if you look at deer hide, it's not very thick. And so the reason for putting two together, they will actually stitch two pieces of leather together, so that way it would make it thicker and stronger. And they're concave, meaning they're not flat, but they kind of have a dome shape to them. But most of them were concave. There's even some that were convex, kind of bending outward. But most of them were concave, kind of like a contact lens, I guess. And they're very heavy. I don't think I weighed any of the shields, but they had some weight to them, just because they're made out of leather. Now the other one only had one piece. It was made out of one layer, so it's fairly thick. And so the animal that has really thick hide would be a buffalo. And so that people hunted buffalo, and they've hunted buffalo for a long time. Their hides are very thick. And so they're two shields, Pueblo shields, but using two different ways of making the shield. It just depends on what materials that they had. And now the reason why the museum had it is the same reason why many museums had a lot of those things in the early 1900s. Because all these ethnographers were trying to save all these indigenous cultures, because they thought that we would all disappear by now. And of course, that never happened, but what they ended up doing was they stole a lot of things, or they bought a lot of things when the original owners weren't home. It's kind of what happened with a flute that was from Jemez. The owner of the flute wasn't home, but his wife was home, and they kind of ended up somewhere else on the East Coast. So that's how those shields ended up there. And of course, one way to bribe people was not just with money, but with alcohol, which happened a lot in the past. And surprisingly, too, it still happens. People don't have money. They need money. If they belong to a certain group within the Pueblo, then they have access to a lot of valuable things. And people will buy that stuff. And people have been caught, especially here, and not just here in Jemez, but other Pueblos too. So those two shields were made in that fashion, the same with the ones at the Mayak, either one layer or two layers. And sometimes they were made out of the rawhide. And rawhide is just the skin of the animal, and nothing's been done to that skin. They're allowed to dry, so they're very, how you describe it, very hard, very tough, like a drum, the rawhide on the drum. Some of the skins have been tanned slightly, especially if they're two layers. They're sewn together with an interesting stitch, a blind stitch, which is a stitch that doesn't go all the way through. It kind of just goes in between the pieces of leather. So it's another very hard technique to learn. And they did it in concentric circles, starting from the center and then going out every inch or so all the way to the rim. So it was a tough thing to do. I didn't try it, only on a small piece of leather, but doing that to a whole shield probably would have taken a lot of time. But that's what they did. That's what they needed to do. They needed the shields. And it's a defensive tool. You wouldn't use it to throw at anybody, not like Captain America does in the movies. So you would just hold on to it to kind of defend yourself from bows, from arrows, from rocks, from war clubs, just things being thrown at you. So these were tools to get close to the enemy, and I do explain that briefly in the video. And so that's what I learned, working on those shields. And I was grateful for it too. And we do have a word for it. Kyose is our Jemez word for shield, and we still use them, just not in the same way as we did in the past. Those big shields aren't around anymore, but there are smaller type shields that still exist, that we still use today. Well, mostly for ceremonial purposes.
Marlon, I have a quick question. How many young folks in the Pueblo are following in your footsteps to study archaeology or kind of talk to you about your experience and your history?
None that I really know of now. I know a lot of younger people are doing kind of their own thing. I haven't been really asked very much. There has been some interest in the language part, but not much in anthropology or archaeology. We do get some people from Jemez going up to the sites when we were still open, but no one really, that I know of at least, going into this field. There may be some people that I just haven't heard about yet.
Well, I'm wondering about the shields and when they started using them. Did they just start using them when bow and arrows were used, or were they something that was part of the culture for a long time before that?
Yeah, some of the earliest evidence of shields will probably come in the form of petroglyphs. And there are some petroglyphs that date back to the basket maker periods, basket maker, I think 1 and 2. And I think, and then one shield was found in an excavation. I can't remember at the top of my head, but it's also in my report too. Is a shield actually made out of plant material. It's actually made like a basket. And there's pictures of this shield in my report, but I think it was found somewhere in Utah. But a lot of the evidence are of those petroglyphs. So if you see a petroglyph of a big circle with the little head on the top and legs sticking out on the bottom, that's probably a shield. And just based off of that, you can see how big those shields are, and they were pretty big. They're about 2 feet, 24 inches in diameter. An average size or height of a person back then was probably 5'2", 5'4" for the males. So 2 feet would cover a large portion of their body. Even if they kneel down, they could probably cover their whole body, and because they weren't that big. And so that's when you could tell that they're using them most likely for defense. So there's probably a lot of conflict going on, and it's common. A lot of conflicts did happen. People competing for space, people competing for food or places to plant food once they start growing things, or even for hunting areas. One group of people may want to hunt a certain place, but there's another group there already. So conflicts are always happening. So shields were one way to protect people, protect themselves from other people trying to attack them. For resources. So shields have been around for quite a long time, even though they don't survive very well in the archaeological record, but they do survive on petroglyphs. And if you can date those petroglyphs, then you can pretty much tell when those were.
Okay, thank you.
I think I have a pretty good example on my phone here of
Oh,
2 little legs peeking out behind the shield on the petroglyph.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Polly Shaftsma, I think, has done a lot of research on those shield petroglyphs. I think she has a whole book dedicated to it, which I don't have yet, which I guess I should eventually get. And I think on the Mesa Prieta too, I think there's a lot of shield petroglyphs there too, which I would like to see someday. I know they have a lot of flute petroglyphs there too. So.
Marlon, Sandy
Yes.
Haynes. Speaking of flutes, I wanted to ask you about how you got interested in flute making and flute playing, and also what kind of history is there to use of flutes at Jemez or other pueblos?
It's a good question. Yeah, I guess I should eventually write something about this topic. So 2007, I do have a short story on my website, marlonmagdalena.com, where I talk a little bit about this story that I'm going to tell. In 2007, we used to have a powwow every year, Memorial Day, in May. And so I'm not very, how would I say it? I don't like powwows very much. I know a lot of people here like to do the whole powwow thing. I like to go every now and then, but this time we just went just to go see what was going on, to talk to people, to see everyone. And they had vendors there, so we were walking around. It's me and my girlfriend and our daughter, I think it was at this time. My son wasn't born yet, so and I heard some flute music playing. Somebody was playing a flute in one of the booths, and so we continued walking, and we came to this booth where this guy was selling flutes. And so they were fairly inexpensive. I think it was $65 at the time. I bought my first flute because I liked the sound and I liked how easy it was to play. And so since then, after that, I had to buy another one just to see all the other flutes. And so I researched on the internet, found out about other makers, how they look, and since then, I started buying more flutes. My second flute I still have. It was made by John Stewart from Stellar Flutes out of Washington State. The first flute I actually don't have anymore, because when I started making them a year later in 2008, I kind of was I guess practicing on that first flute, kind of carving it to make it sound better, and it kind of got away from me, so it kind of doesn't exist anymore. Became firewood. And so I started making my own, just buying kits on eBay. Flute kits you can buy that are kind of halfway made. You just finish it. Because I didn't really have a lot of tools yet. I couldn't really cut my own wood. I didn't really have saws or carving tools. So all of that just I started to accumulate different tools until I really started making them, I guess, later that year in 2008. I have one flute. It's actually a Rimblum, a different type of flute that I made in 2008 in September, which I still use. And then I started researching on flutes from around the country. And then I started learning about flutes that existed here in the Southwest. And so these flutes, they go back at least 1,000 years. The flutes, the earliest ones that I came across were from Arizona, just north of Canyon de Chelly. They were excavated by Earl Morris in the early 1900s. He found some flutes in a cave. There's 4 of them. And some modern makers had already started making replicas of these flutes. But as they're making these replicas, they're making them so that way they're easier to play for modern flute players. And modern flute players play a certain way. I guess I could say they're playing the wrong way, because the original flutes didn't look like these newer flutes. So what he was doing was he would add certain things to the flutes to make it easier for these modern players. And so I made flutes like that sometimes, but then I just decided that's not the original flute. You're just completely changing it by trying to make it easier. You just got to learn the proper techniques. And so the thing is that the proper techniques have been lost at many of the pueblos, because a lot of the pueblos play these types of flutes. they're just difficult to learn how to make sounds from them. And so once you start losing that ability to play these flutes, they're going to start, or that type of flute is just going to stop being made, because why should we make it if we can't play it? So they started adopting other flutes. Some flutes actually may have been traded with the raramuri, the tarahumara, down in Mexico, because they made flutes too out of bamboo, which could have been traded up here. And so each culture is sharing with each other. But these Rimblum flutes, they dated back to the 600s, so what, 1400 years ago. The same types of flutes are found in Chaco Canyon, Pueblo Bonito. I think they even found one in Mesa Verde and in Grand Gulch in Utah. The one in Grand Gulch, I've actually made a replica of. It's a very short 13-inch flute, but it's a rimblum. If you don't know what a rimblum is, you have to blow a certain way on the rim. I don't know if you've seen, I don't know if I have one here, but you have to blow a certain way, so they're very difficult to play. And so those are the earliest types of flutes. There were bone flutes made from different animal bones that also existed, which were a whole different type of flute. But those ones were a little bit easier to play, because they would make them a certain way, so that way when you just blow on one end, you could produce a sound without doing anything special with your lips, like the rimblums. They also used reeds. They made reed flutes and whistles the very same way you would make a bird whistle, because they're about the same size as to a bird bone. And then eventually they kind of keep using those flutes up at least until the 20th century. And then they kind of just go away. I know the Hopi may still use them, but I'm not from Hopi. I haven't seen their flute ceremonies, which they apparently still have. They have some flute clans. And even in Jemez, we have a flute clan, which is a very important clan here. And flutes are still part of our culture. We still use them. We only hear them, though. I've never seen anybody use a flute at least in my lifetime. I've only heard them being used. So there's something that are only meant to be heard. And with many Pueblo cultures, if you don't belong to a certain society or group, you don't really know what they do, or you can't know what they do unless you become part of that group. So luckily, I am part of a group, and I was asked to fix, I think, 3 flutes that belonged to this group, and I was actually able to see them. And it just kind of proved my theory that we were trading with other groups of people, especially the raramuri from Mexico, because they're almost the exact same type of flute. The only difference between the rimblums and these flutes is that the raramuri flutes are just like a recorder. You just blow into the end and the sound's produced. So they're very easy to play. You don't really need to know any techniques like the rimblums. So I can see what may have happened. Those other flutes may have just been put to rest, and then they just started using these other flutes because they're easier to play. The thing that mattered was the sounds. As long as they can make the beautiful music and the sounds, they're doing their job for those particular ceremonies. So I've learned a lot just by starting to play flutes. And the flutes that many people play now are, they have their own history. Some say that they may have derived from European recorders, or they may have been evolved from those flutes from Mexico. They just kind of made their way up here with the rest of the things that made their way up this way. So even those ones have a lot of their own history. And those flutes are easy to play too. What I call the 2-chamber block flutes. Some people will just call them Native American flutes, but all Native Americans were not just one culture. Each culture had their own type of flutes, instruments. So it's kind of a misnomer, but most people know them as Native American flutes or Native American style flutes. And I have a lot of them behind me too. It's a lot of my collection, my stands here on the wall. I even have some next to me that I kind of just play throughout the day as I'm working. If I don't know, just to take a break, I'll just play a song or two, just play something.
Would you play something for us?
Sure. I don't know how it will sound on with this mic here. This one here I used in my flute concert. I don't know if you all saw the flute concert that I did inside the church. This is that flute that I started using at the beginning. It's made out of camphor. I don't know if you've ever smelled camphor wood before, but this flute was made in 2019 and it still smells. It's a very fragrant wood. That was Jemez Warrior Honor Song, or at least part of that song, which is a song I learned from my Uncle Jimmy. I don't think I really mentioned or explained very much about who he was in my concert. But my Uncle Jimmy was there when I first bought my flutes. I was actually talking to him first at the powwow. He had a booth. And so I bought my flute and I took it back to him just to show him that I bought a flute. Because he had just started playing flutes and he actually made an album of flute music, I think a year or two later. So that song was one that he would play, Jemez Warrior Honor Song, and I use some of his songs when I perform. He actually died in a car crash in 2009 in December, as he was driving home from Fort Lewis in Durango. So there's a lot of snow on the road, 550, and so that's when he died. So I tried to play some of his songs kind of in his memory. He was my grandma's brother, younger brother, my dad's mom, so on my dad's side. So I was able to at least, I learned a lot from him because he had a band too. He sang for a group that he had, and he played guitar and he played flute. He was a pretty good musician, and so I trying to keep his memory just by playing some of his songs.
So we're just right at an hour now. Appreciate it, Marlon. This was really wonderful and very informative. It will appear on the kuaua.org website, and it will be under programs on that website. So you can watch it again if you'd like, or if you just want to listen to the music, you can zip down to the end.